It's my pleasure to be able to provide you a report and update on our activities associated with the strategic plan, focusing on our 3-star items and any other items that are noteworthy to bring up. This also has an inclusion of some Q2, some long-range planning associated with our strategic plan. As you've probably noticed when you're walking into the room, we have a timeline of third, fourth, and first quarters of 2 years, 3 years, that we'll go through afterwards to help facilitate a discussion of some of these items. And although we have a strategic plan that is about usually a year to 18 months long, many items take much longer. And this will also help show that timeline and how things get accomplished. And also it'll help provide an opportunity for you to take a look at and assess the priority items that we are working diligently on. And if you want to change some of those priority projects, this would be a great opportunity for us to have that discussion also. During the discussion of the quarterlies, we'll have the department directors and we'll ask for you to come down. We move some chairs. We'll all be standing right in this area, and we'll have a department head, say we'll start with Public Works, go through each quarter and talk about each one of the projects associated with Public Works and follow those through the chain and the life cycle that we have here. And then you can ask questions about that specific one. Say, for instance, asset management. Jason will start with the third quarter in 2021 and move through asset management through its completion. And then if you have any questions, we'll move on to ask those questions, and we'll move on to the next one. During that process, Jason will have a microphone. And if council has questions, you'll have to get the microphone before you ask the question. So, because you're not on the dais, and we want to make sure we get everything recorded appropriately. So that's just a little coordination, facilitation thing, just to note. Okay? Awesome. Well, I'm going to get started with a strategic plan summary. This is our opportunity to sort of celebrate and give you an idea of what we've been working on and the successes that we have, and
Aaron,
how we're doing on progressing towards some of those goals that you have.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Councillor Auger says she doesn't have any audio. Oh, thank you.
You're very familiar with this little circle here, the circle of life when it comes to our strategic plan. It really starts with, and I think it's important for us to reiterate each time, Council has expressed an interest in making sure that you get a lot of information from your constituents, and you do that through a number of ways. One of the ways is you target and all your advisory committees, which we have 11 plus advisory committees. And each year, come October, November, they sit down and they talk about what their goals are for the upcoming year or 2 years. And they put those together and they provide those to you during strategic planning. We also have surveys and hold community forums for the general public to be able to provide input on what they'd like to have for our community. And then staff also provides suggestions for council. And then also council, you as an individual, have your own worksheets that you put together. And all of those things come together. We meet over a 3-day period and talk about every one of those goals that were presented, whether it be from an advisory committee or from a member of the public. We define what they are so we make sure we know what we're talking about. And then ultimately at the end of those 3 days, you've prioritized all the goals and objectives and actions associated with that strategic plan. And we have a strategic plan that is ultimately adopted. From there, staff puts together a work plan, and that work plan is really the engine that helps drive that strategic plan and make things happen. Once that work plan is established, we have an idea of what type of activities are required, and how we're going to measure it, what type of resources in order to make that happen. And that's one of the things that makes our strategic planning process such a success, is because we have what we call SMART goals. They're specific, they're measurable, we know what it takes to achieve them, what kind of resources and timeline are we talking about. That is an important document along with the strategic plan, because ultimately the budget that we develop, the allocation of resources, is based off of the strategic plan, which is based off of the work plan, and the budget goes to support the work plan to make those things happen. Out of strategic planning, you have 5 main goals: enhance community safety, provide cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and the community, encourage economic opportunities, facilitate sustainable manageable growth, maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. Those 5 goals are supported by 23 objectives, and those 23 objectives are further supported by 104 different actions. And these numbers change a little bit. Your 5 goals don't change normally, but sometimes an objective or an action is added throughout the year based on goals and priorities and the way things shift within the community. Out of this year's strategic planning process, there's 5 main priority goals that came out of that. The first was explore urban renewal agency opportunities for Caveman Plaza. I think that's on your agenda for a future discussion item coming up, I believe, this month. Implement housing action plan, public facility management plan, trail development and recreation, and create a city climate task force. So those are your 5 top goals coming out of strategic planning this year. What I'd like to first do is start off by just providing a couple of highlights, and then we'll move into your 3-star items and the actions that have been taken on those 3-star items. First, under enhanced community safety, we'll go through the first goal. Objective 1, maintain necessary criminal justice infrastructure. Action 1, pass a public safety levy. That was a 2-star item, and very pleased to say that that passed overwhelmingly with a 71.32%, and that item is complete. So now we have additional funding for public safety for 3 years. Under enhanced community safety, another one, objective 3, utilize technology and social media to produce positive outcomes relative to improvements in public safety. So we're working on a new app called Neighbors, and that allows us to streamline and upload video from businesses and residential camera systems, which is really another eyes and ears out on the street, as those cameras. We use them in the parks, and you know that they're valuable there, but for us to be able to also use some of the camera infrastructure throughout the community is another very positive. Under provide corrupt shared leadership, objective 1, evaluate and ensure financial stability of utility funds, review water rate structure. So one of the things council did do is you reviewed your bulk water rates, and you did make some changes to that and increased the fee from $6.50 per thousand to $12 per thousand gallons of water. And that's a very successful program utilized by a lot of the community, both primarily in areas outside the city limits. So, under the same goal, objective 2, develop and implement community communication strategy. Action 2, increase public awareness of decision-making regarding the water treatment plant. That was a 1-star item, but it was something that was highlighted because, of course, what we're doing, we're taking on the challenge of the largest capital expenditure in the city's history, which is the development of a new water treatment plant. And council has expressed an interest to make sure that the public has as much awareness as possible on this program. So action 2 includes a couple of items that we wanted to highlight. In the June issue of GP Now, we featured an update on the initial cleanup efforts of the new water treatment plant. A lot of progress has been made out there. If you drive on the road and you look down, you can really see that that property has really changed. We've also had multiple social media posts which have highlighted the status of the updates to conduct site cleanups, which is happening right now, to keep people informed of all the actions. That's something we'll continue to do throughout the year, is whenever there's anything going on out there, we'll continue to post it so people can visually see what's going on out there and have an understanding through our social media posts. Under the same goal, objective 2, continuing under objective 2, action 5, partner with schools and organizations to do more public outreach throughout the city. We had a very successful poster contest, there when you need it, with regards to drinking water. Staff is working regularly with county emergency management to include monthly messages associated with that. And then also we're coordinating with Josephine County Youth Foundation to receive updates about student programs and provide information about city services, as well as supporting student community involvement. Under Objective 3, ensure efficiency and effectiveness in city operations. Action 1, implement a new online city utility customer service platform. This was a 2-star item. So we do have a new custom portal which went live in May 2021. It is definitely a better improvement to what we had before in the past, which will make it more user-friendly for everyone involved. And then also we have an interactive voice recognition software which was implemented in June of this year. And the software also comes with a dashboard for staff to monitor volume and efficiency, and that is a complete item. Under the same goal, Objective 4, shared constituency, Beacon Drive improvements. Now, some of us have been watching Beacon Drive, those especially that live in the Northeast area, and have seen that there's been a lot of progress, but also you've seen that it seems like it's stopped to some degree also. And so it's like, is the light switch on or is it off? What's going on? And actually, I know a little bit about it, but maybe Jason, can you just sort of provide some details on why does it look like the project is sort of stalled when I thought we were going to get going on it?
So it looks like the project is stalled because it is, in a big way. We've had a snafu with the phone company. There have been multiple surveys and calls for locates on that project, and 2 phone lines, 1 fiber optic, 1 copper line, were not located on 4 surveys. Finally, when we get to digging in the ground and we're getting all the construction locates done, the phone company did locate a line for us right in the middle of where construction has to occur. Had we known it was there, we would have designed around it or asked them to move it much earlier. We are in the process of resolving that with the phone company. In the meantime, we're trying to work with the contractor to see if he is able to flip the direction of the water line essentially and start from the bottom and work his way down. We normally don't do that, but we're just trying to keep this project moving because we're already holding up the county's project. There's a lot going on up there, but we're making as much progress as we can without actually looking like we're making progress, but we are.
Any questions on that one? I figured there'd be a couple on that.
So do you imagine that to potentially be a redesign, or do you think there's a possibility of moving the line, or is it too early to tell?
The line is in the process of being moved. They have up to 90 days to accomplish that, unfortunately. We are trying to encourage that 90 days to be greatly reduced.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Under maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs, we have Objective 7, which is ensure park infrastructure needs are met. Action 7, Caveman Pool Task Force. That is up and running, operational, and making progress. I know Councilor King has been directly involved with that, and he can maybe provide you some additional information also, but we do have some citizen members. They're looking at the future of a pool, caveman pool and or a community pool. And they'll ultimately be providing you with a recommendation after they've received comments from the public and have finalized their recommendations. It'll be going to you for your consideration. Have anything to add to that, Councilor King?
The group is working very hard, and I don't want to second guess them. They're fully informed, they know what I know, and they know some things I don't know, which is probably a good thing. That's probably why they're on the committee. So I think we're making good progress, and we'll stay on that timeline.
And just, I know this is part of the Caveman Pool Task Force, but you may also have noticed that we have had some difficulty with the operations of the pool. 2 issues. One has been a operational issue with the pool and the water quality, and the other is associated with staffing levels and lifeguards, and both have created some closure days associated with the pool because sometimes our chemicals have been relatively difficult to get. Chlorine, of course, is one of those issues, and then also staffing levels from a standpoint of lifeguards in general. And it's not just isolated to the city of Grants Pass. I've actually seen national news cover shortage of lifeguards throughout the nation. It is a shortage right now from a staffing perspective. And we do contract with the YMCA, and they're the ones that actually do the the staffing of the pool, where we are responsible for the operations and making sure that the facility itself is operational and meets all guidelines and standards. And we've been trying to make sure that we put out information as much as possible whenever the pool happens to be shut down for one of those reasons, put banners on our website, et cetera, to make sure it's very prominent that the community knows when it's open. Now, progress on 3-star items. We've got enhanced community safety. Objective 2, prevention-focused community policing to help reduce crime and build public trust. Grants Pass Police has partnered with School District 7 to develop conversational Spanish classes to department personnel and open lines of communication for cultural diversity to improve the understanding of specific needs of different ethnic groups within the city of Grants Pass. Under Encourage Economic Opportunities, Objective 1, facilitate an environment to encourage business prosperity and economic opportunities, explore urban renewal agency opportunities for Caveman Plaza. The redevelopment profile and preliminary outline of a strategy for property owners and public engagement will be presented at the July 26th council workshop. So that's coming up shortly. We've got Action 2, alley activation and beautification. You may recall this presentation at a workshop. It looks like it's a great concept, and the COPA is associated with this also, and they're moving forward with this project. Under Facilitate Sustainable Manageable Growth, Objective 2, encourage an environment which provides for the growth of affordable housing opportunities for the variety of Grants Pass residents' needs. There are a number of items that fit underneath this. We're highlighting some that we have action on. But in your work plan itself, it also goes on and continues the number of other action items that primarily came from the Housing Advisory Committee through your advisory committee making recommendations on what that should be. Facilitate the development of a homeless shelter and or urban campground. To date, no property owners in the industrial zone have affirmed a willingness to partner with the city. That was the last report we had. We do have an upcoming workshop in August, I believe, that will be discussing urban campgrounds and the potential locations for an urban campground. So I do have some additional information that we can report and have a discussion with the council on to further this. We do have, though, we have been making progress on all other fields besides just a property location. Working with Rogue Retreat and UCAN, we have found funding to help with the inventory that would be required in order to have an urban campground, such as pallet shelters. Currently, right now, we are storing 25 pallet shelters because we were able to get funding through UCAN, federal funding through UCAN, to purchase some pallet shelters. So when we have a designated location within the city or in our community, could be outside the city also if that's where the property is found, we already are starting to have the infrastructure that we can get going right away. So that's exciting news. Action 3, rezone the urban growth boundary, especially those areas that are, say, for instance, Allen Creek area is one of those areas that have a high opportunity for redevelopment to provide for affordable housing. So council has continued to want to make sure that this is an incentive, and what council is really doing is extremely unique. What council is wanting us to do is incentivize the development and rezoning of those properties and provide for the transportation impact analysis to be done. That's going to save developers time and money when they come in and they want to do a redevelopment on their site once it's rezoned. So this is something that is unique. I think it might catch on throughout the state of Oregon elsewhere, but it is a great proactive opportunity that we're going to be providing the business sector and helping them get through the process quicker. Action 9, aggressively gear up for the implementation of House Bill 2001. And we're in the process of development code text amendment, which is drafted, and a public hearing is before the UAPC, and that'll be scheduled for the fourth quarter. So after we get that public comment from the UAPC, it'll be coming to you, to council ultimately. Continue some of the items through the Housing Action Plan is conduct a housing needs analysis. Consultants submitted their final draft of the housing needs analysis to the community development in June. I think you might have gotten a copy of, we sent a copy out to you to take a look at that. The contract was funded through the Department of Land and Conservation and Development, and that closed on June 30th. The draft will be reviewed by staff and distributed to the Housing Advisory Committee and Urban Area Planning Commission, ultimately with public hearings, and it'll be, come in front of you also. Under Facilitate Sustainable Management Growth, another 3-star would be Action 13, Develop Minimum Density Zones. Housing Advisory Committee made a motion. It was presented to council during the second quarter workshop. Councilors then, after taking a look at that motion and hearing the information, wanted to get some additional feedback from the Housing Advisory Committee, so sent it back to the Housing Advisory Committee. They have held one meeting in the second quarter on the topic, and it's scheduled for another one in the third quarter. And then after that, we anticipate they'll be providing their recommendations, their full recommendations to you for consideration. Action 16, Facilitate Development of Low-Income Housing. Negotiations with AVS Communities and LLC continues. And Brad, do you want to give any kind of update on that, or is that's in here? That's in the. We'll do it then. That'll be a good time to do it. That's one of the items that's in here, and when we go through and talk about it, we'll talk about it at that point. Plan and develop infrastructure under maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. Action 1, Public Facility Management Plan. An RFP has been developed and is being reviewed by an asset management professional to ensure that all desired impacts of the project have been captured. The RFP will be posted in early July with an intended award in September. And that's on the timeline here that Jason can highlight later on in the meeting. Objective 2, ensure water infrastructure needs are met. Action 1, build new water treatment plant. Staff interviewed finalists to the city's design build process. 4 strong proposals were received with final selection in July. And that's a picture of the site sort of cleared out, so that's sort of good. And ultimately, when we do a tour, we were talking about doing a tour later on with a bus. This is one of the sites we can drive through and take a look at, so you see what it looks like, just totally bare. Under the same goal, but Objective 4, ensure transportation infrastructure needs are met. Action 1, develop a parking restroom management plan. This is more focused on the restroom portion of that plan. On June 16th, Council did approve the purchase of 3 Portland Loos. Staff will work with the manufacturer to finalize the order and provide information to Council to finalize the locations. So once we have those in place, I think we have a general idea of where 2 might go. Council has expressed I think some council members have expressed a desire to continue to have those discussions on where they might end up, and then we have a 3rd that we'll be able to place somewhere. Objective 7, ensure park infrastructure needs are met. Action 1, trail development and recreation. This is a great addition and connectivity from one park, a school park ultimately, school to our park, Reinhardt. District 7 did install a path and is completing the paving in the second quarter. It looks wonderful out there. And then also trails are forthcoming on Dollar Mountain that we've talked about. And what's neat about the trails at Dollar Mountain is they're pretty much all grant funded to some degree. We've gotten a lot of grant funding for that. So that's been a very exciting project. Action 2, develop a forest stewardship and recreational use plan for Dollar Mountain. Travel Oregon grant awarded. Trail construction is planned for the 4th quarter, and Oregon State Parks Recreational Trails Program grant was submitted. And this is just a picture of the phase 1 of the trails that would be further trail development in Dollar Mountain. We've got Action 3, develop Beacon Hill Park. Staff has met on site with representatives. I know Councilor Lovelace was very instrumental in this. I think it was her Rotary Club that might have been active in this one. Yep, I see a head shake. ODOT and GPID to discuss plan for volunteer tree planting and maintenance. And Urban Forester provided 3 species recommendations for the Rotary. And Councilor, do you want to add anything to that one?
No, the Rotary has about $2,500, I think, that they're purchasing trees with for that area. I think there was 10 trees that are purchased, and then in November they'll arrive, and our Rotary will plant them and nurture them for 3 years. And we have the GPID there because they're going to provide water for us in a spigot so that we will be able to water them.
Oh,
and,
nice.
and put them. So yes, we've made those arrangements already. So looking forward to that in November.
Thank you. We have restore and/or replace Caveman Pool. The pool is functioning, and new lifeguard chairs are in place. And we're working on recommendations for a long-term strategy for the pool, as we mentioned, through the task force, the sort of quasi-task force through the Parks Advisory Committee. We have action 5, install additional security cameras throughout the park system. Staff is working with IT and vendors to ensure that additional placements have cell phone connectivity. So we got to make sure that those cameras are able to have cell service. We have action 6, identify park infrastructure priorities. We've done a lot of work with that, and we're moving, and it's exciting. We're going to be moving forward with a number of court repairs and conversions. Some of the repairs are going to be fixing the tennis courts or the basketball courts. Some of the conversions are taking some of the tennis or basketball courts and converting them into the ever-growing popular sport of pickleball. And ultimately, I had an opportunity to talk to I think it was the president and vice president, actually, of the new Pickleball Association, and they were so jazzed about what council and the community's done with the pickleball here. And I asked them, so with these things, are we going to be able to have tournaments and bring people in here? And they seem pretty excited that this is going to be a pretty cool place for pickleball and bringing in individuals to come in to do tournaments. So that's cool. Also, some of the other things is $150,000 Baker Park State Marine Board grant. Construction will be planned in 2022. That is such an important boat ramp. That Baker Park there is such a highly used location. It's great to be able to get $150,000 to help do upgrades there. Loveless Park grants were awarded, and that's really cool. Public outreach has been conducted, and construction is planned for the fourth quarter. So we got a lot of neat things going on at that park also.
I have a brief question for you, Aaron.
Yeah.
What kind of construction is expected for Baker Park with those grants?
Oh, for the boat ramp,
Yeah.
boat ramp grant?
So we'll be tearing up the parking lot basically from Park Street, all down. It won't be the ramp itself, but pretty much everything else. Complete rebuild, all the curbing, new striping. So it's really just kind of a complete parking lot from that and driveway.
Very cool, thanks.
So objective 8, enhance opportunities to promote character and community spirit. Create a city climate task force. Staff has met with Councilor DeLagrange and Auger and interested citizens, Mr. Bradbeer, to discuss potential scope of a future climate task force. And that's to be presented to council early in the third quarter. So as you noticed, there was a lot of big ticket items, a lot of things that we've been working on. And again, we've been able to make progress on these things because of the guidance that you provide as a policy board in making these things happen and providing that direction for us. And then one of the things that I've noticed in doing these presentations, which is really exciting, is when I'm giving the report on the progress, so much of the progress was contingent not only on you as a policy board, but also the skills of staff and the volunteerism of our community members. So many of these items have that three-legged stool associated with it, and it's really neat to be able to report on that. And it's been my pleasure to represent the voice of this report. So with that, I turn it over to you, Mayor, if you have any specific questions on some of these items. And then after that's done, I think we can move down here, and I'd like to take the opportunity to have the department directors go through each one of those items, and we can talk about the timelines and the prioritization of some of those things.
Thank you. Thanks for the good presentation, Aaron. We have a lot of different items that we've been working on. Questions, anybody? Valerie?
No, it's great. It's always nice to see that. I've always appreciated the pictures and this is because it does kind of give you the opportunity to see, because we always are so disjointed in how we do things, that it's nice to see the progress in this sense. One of the things I have a question about is the skate park, because I know we were doing an RFP or something on that. So I was just wondering, that wasn't necessarily in our goals, but I do know that that has come up. And I was curious as to where we are in that process.
Yeah, we're sort of treating that as like the court
Maintenance.
resurfacing and stuff is preventive maintenance, so does, you want to?
Yeah, it's in engineering right now. We're also struggling to find contractors. It's pretty specialized work, and there's some challenges with where the cracks are and some groundwater issues, but we should have that out on the street, I would guess, in the next couple of months, we're thinking.
Okay, so the RFP. or the-
RFP, yeah, for getting the work performed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions? Joel?
Well, it's a question phrased as a statement, which is always kind of fun to do. Most questions are statements. So when people ask questions, you say, well, what would you really like to say? And then they will answer that question. One of the things that, good presentation, appreciate the work that you did in it. There's a lot of lower priority items. It would take too much time to cover all of them. And I just look at a couple of them, like the trees on the Washington Boulevard and the heritage trees and the work of the committee. And that's just one example, but there's works of the other committees that have been very valuable to the future of our city and to the building of our city social fabric. So I appreciate the leadership of everybody here in building that social fabric. And if you have a strong social fabric, it doesn't make any difference what the issues are. If you have a poor social fabric, it doesn't make any difference what the issues are. So that is a very important part of our city. So I just appreciate what you're doing. And there's a lot of lower things there that haven't been lower priority things. It doesn't mean they're less important, just is in how we get things done. And but some of those have been done as well.
Brian?
Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. I want to first recognize you and the directors and the staff, because I know that you have gotten a lot done in the first 6 months of this year. And I, for one, very much appreciate all of the work that you all have done. So thank you. And then I just had a question about our process here, because I see on the agenda, we're doing the update and then the next thing is strategic planning priorities. So is this part of that, the priorities, or is there a discussion happening after that, or is it all kind of mixed together?
From that standpoint, it's sort of mixed together. We were going to talk about these as the priorities and how we're going to be spending time taking care of these items. So for instance, if some of these are like, well, I'm not sure why that's up there, maybe that shouldn't be a priority. Let's switch that with, say, I think this needs to be something that needs to be taken a look at. And so this is just a visual to help start to form those discussions. But there's nothing specifically structured on, because I need direction from council on if you're wanting to reprioritize anything in the work plan, then this is the time for us to start discussing this. Let's say a council member has a specific project that doesn't have any progress yet on, or if you look in here, the progress is not until the fourth quarter, but you want it in the third quarter or something, then that's the opportunity for us to start talking about rearranging some of the bandwidth associated with some of these projects. And if there's something that council wants us to work on that we haven't made enough progress on or we haven't touched on yet, this is that opportunity.
Okay, then thank you for that clarification. So I'll just mention a couple things personally that I think probably should be prioritized in the second half of the year. I've had a goal of having some sort of shelter before winter. And I know that myself and other counselors have had that goal since the beginning of the year, and we're getting, we're halfway through the year and we still got a ways to go. So, other counselors can speak for themselves, but for me personally, I have a goal of us having some sort of shelter or urban campground open in November before the weather starts to turn more towards winter. So that's just one thing that I would like to see more priority on. And then the thing that has been, kind of dogging council for years is housing. And we've made a little bit of progress there, but I feel like, making progress, real progress on housing needs to be a top priority. And we got a couple things in the works, and they're kind of, slow going. They have to go through their processes. But I would personally like to see a renewed focus on figuring out what we can do to solve the housing issue here. And then I know in a couple weeks, we're going to be talking about the wildfire, and we're going to be having a presentation on things we can do there. And when that comes up in a couple weeks, I'm going to be rearing to go on that too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just mention to everybody, I guess, that part of the reason why we structured this the way we did today is that, we touch on a lot of things. We've made progress on a lot of things, as Aaron just reviewed with us, but especially during, agenda review, we have a opportunity always to add new things to the agenda, and sometimes it feels like those things cut in line a little bit, and we get a couple people with, with an issue that they want to look into, and we add that fairly quickly to the agenda. And sometimes there's some big picture items like the housing issue that keep getting pushed behind. So I guess my hope for today is that after I don't know exactly what staff has planned for us here, but that we do each kind of point out some things that you really want to tackle, particularly, in the next 6 months here before we come back around to strategic planning in January. And, let's, if we can identify a couple of specific things that we really want to make sure we get done in the next 6 months here to identify what those are so that we can really tackle those. And then we'll fit in the other things, as time is available. But, it's important for DJ and I when we're doing the agenda setting, to know, hey, if housing or wildfire preparedness or whatever is something that you really want to make sure we get done, like ASAP, that we not let these other smaller items keep bumping the big ticket items down the road. So any other questions, I guess, before we move on to the next phase of presentation? Not seeing any. I have not heard from Vanessa. I know that she can hear us. Can she talk to us?
Mayor Bristol?
Hi. Do you have any questions or comments before we move on?
Not at this time. Thank you for asking.
Thanks. I'm glad you can hear us now. All right. We'll hand it back to you, Aaron.
All right, great. So as remembered, what we'd like to do is invite all of you down, just get a comfortable space for yourself out in here. Staff will have one microphone. I'll have the other one that I could just pass to. We just have to make sure that when you're asking questions, so everything's recorded well, that you have the microphone and you guys can just pass it around amongst yourselves. I'll just leave it on, so you don't have to worry about turning it on or off. It's just going to be on, and whoever has it is there. So if you could come on down. If I had the voice of the guy who does The Price is Right, I'd be all over that. Joel King, you're the next contestant on The Price is Right. All right, well, welcome, council, mayor. We've got staff here. I will start with the first project, and what we're going to do, and then I'll probably turn it over to Public Works next, and then Community Development or whatever. So we're going to start, and I'm going to highlight one that I've sort of taken the lead on, which is urban campground. So what I'd like to do is go through the sort of the life cycle of this, and awesomely enough, it addresses one of your number one priorities that you just mentioned. So it's like, yeah. So here we go. Let's talk about urban campground and where we are looking at the long-range perspective, recognizing that this is an item that council is interested in. We have here that council direction on property procurement and ownership would begin or start in July. So we do actually have a meeting coming up in August. I think it's August 16th, if you look at the schedule, where we're going to ultimately have an executive session to discuss urban campgrounds with council. I'll be reporting to you some potential site locations and get some additional direction from council. Now, I wanted to preface that this is important because I think the timeline that we have penciled out here is actually going to meet the timeline that Councilor DeLaGrange was wanting also. And so we might be able to meet those expectations. So moving on from there, there's going to be direction that's going to be needed from council on a property procurement. And then coming into October, November, the procurement of services agreement and site preparation would be occurring. So somewhere between August, September, October, November, we'd be looking at site procurement and also establishment and site preparation, depending on what site it is and what work is needed. As I mentioned just a minute ago, we've already started the procurement of what is needed from a hardscape standpoint, and we're continuing to do that. Not only is UCAN also had the ability to get funds for those pallet shelters, which this is a picture of here, is actually we're also looking at being able to get 1 to 2 showering trailers that would also be present. One of the things that we'll be talking about, I'm sure, in August is not only urban campground, but one of the things that we've seen an impact on in the parks is not just individuals being able to rest in the parks with their tents, but also individuals resting in the parks with their vehicles. So that is another issue that if we can take a look at a property that can both serve both of those issues, then we could potentially see a positive impact on getting those individuals into a safe place where they can be housed. And then and then we come down in here into January, February, it would be operational. Now, can we get it operational sooner? Well, technically, we've got, of the three-legged stool, I like stools, of the three-legged stool, we need funding, we need someone to operate it, and we need a site. Well, we've got the funding, we have the individuals with a proven success record of operating, and they're ready to go. As soon as we have a designated site, they'll even be more ready to go. So technically, I believe that if the procurement aspect of it can be done in a timely fashion, and we can get clear direction and we can do something in a timely fashion, it will not take long for us to be up and running because we already have pallets waiting to go. So that would be a positive. I think it could be done to where during the worst time of the year, temperature-wise and weather-wise, we'd actually be able to have something in place for council. So that could be a win. So that ends my urban campground item and my discussion on that. Any questions specifically on the urban campground thing at this time or the timeline associated with it? Again, this is just sort of penciled. It could take longer, but I believe on this one, concurrently, we could be doing the other parts of the stool, and we already are. It's just the procurement of the property right now that is the biggest hurdle. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
So my question is, as far as the urban campground and procurement of property, we were, I thought, looking at a social services amendment as far as the possible locations of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't mention any of that today. So where are we with regards to, in other words, so we may be looking at a much smaller selection of properties than ultimately the council would end up approving. So where are we on that?
So ultimately, we have coming up schedule-wise I think it's going to, or it's been at the Urban Area Planning Commission.
It was last week.
It was last week. So from there, it comes to you. And the discussion that I'm going to be bringing forward to you in August is going to be including properties in business and commercial and industrial. So it will be including the concept that you would be opening social services up to general commercial also. Yep. Okay. We'll just, okay, so I'm going to leave this on, yes.
Okay, I'm just kind of reiterating what you said about you're looking beyond just the campground concept, but understanding that there's a lot of parking issues going on with people living in cars. And so that's something that we're kind of taking a look at simultaneously. Was that what?
It
I heard you
is,
say?
and that's something that council will need to consider when they're potentially giving direction on procurement of sites. The size of the site would really dictate what services you can provide. And it would be, I think, ideal if we can choose a location that can house and provide that opportunity for both, because not only are you looking at just a place for them to rest, but there's a lot of additional services that we're needing to make sure that they can have easy access to. And to have one set up here and one set up there, it would be easier, I think, for us to have one if it would be able to accompany all of those things. So, yeah, that would all pertain to the site. And is the site large enough to take on both parking spaces and urban campground area?
The other thing that strikes me in this particular issue, like with the warming shelter, where we had a warming shelter, the city had a warming shelter through nonprofits and a property identified, and then the public involvement resulted in people backing out. And so we need an effective public participation plan for that. If we rush through it without that, what we'll end up doing is just redoing it, and it won't happen. I think that's proven not in just the warming shelter, but in many other projects across all of the United States. So as we go through that, just be aware of that public part of it to make sure that we have an effective public participation plan so that we can implement it in a timely manner.
Thank you. Any other questions on the urban campground? No? All right, then I'm going to turn it over now to Jason, our Public Works Director, and he'll go through some of those projects one by one.
Thank you, Aaron. Boy, where to start? Public Works has a lot of work up on this board. I want to start with asset management. This is one of the projects that was your 3-star coming out of strategic planning, and this is for the Public Facilities Management Plan. The RFP is complete. The RFP has been advertised. We are probably going to do one more change to the spec and release that before we receive proposals. And then we will be doing a 2-phased selection for that contractor. That work should be, we'll be selecting that contractor into the 4th quarter, so in September, October, November, December, excuse me. And hopefully we will start work on identifying the city's assets and creating that master inventory list. We were hoping to be farther along, but we want to get enough of it done in this period so that we can bring some selected projects to strategic planning for consideration. Otherwise, as you can see that this project is going to be dragging on. We know that there's a lot of work to be done, but we're hoping to get that top priority work done so that we know what we need to do moving forward. That may include installing more software. It may involve staffing. Those are the kind of things that we want to be able to bring to strategic planning in the upcoming year. We believe we can have the bulk of the plan completed by April. That's the time frame that we've listed in the RFP, and so far none of the contractors that have responded with questions have questioned the timeline, so that's a good thing. With that, we'll bring that to you for consideration and then wrap that plan up and start with implementation in the 3rd quarter of 2022. So it's going to take quite a while. This is not one that we can just fix in one year. We'll be several years in the making. Questions about the facility management plan?
before I hand over, I'll
Yep.
hand you the mic, I just have one thing. So just so we're not confused, the way these are put on here, if you take a look at these here, it's not set up that housing needs analysis is going to happen in April. It's going to be that it's going to happen in the quarter. It just happens to be, so it's more in general in the quarter, not associated with the month. So I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
And my question was, is this asset management part is just basically buildings and things? We didn't go into the park.
So the scope of work includes parks
It does.
and
okay.
primary public works facilities, meaning the primary facilities at our treatment plants and some of the remote stations. So all above grade infrastructure, nothing below ground. These are your buildings, your park facilities. Now, we are going to have to scale that. When the budget comes in, we're going to come to you and we're going to say, okay, here's the price. Now what do we take out to make it affordable?
Well, in a way, it's kind of like the water, when we put together the stormwater and all those, basically you're just inventorying what you have and what you're going to be needing to look at down the road. Is that correct?
It
And
is.
so
It really is getting a
can't get all
detailed
done.
accounting of the buildings and the facilities and what's in the buildings and what level of care they are in need of.
And that also includes, if I'm correct, the, you restructuring some of the job things, because that also came through that same PAVE report, am I correct?
Well, those were actually in response to the PAVE report, absolutely. One of the things that this will really identify, though, is how much work is perhaps not getting done and needs to get done, which will then lead me to come back to you and say, well, remember that 4 people they said that facilities needed? We're going to ask for 1 or 2 of those, but not until we get farther through this process. Anything else on this one?
This is Vanessa.
Yeah.
Jason, is this going to begin the process of property management absorbing the maintenance requirements for the public safety buildings as well, this process?
That is a great question. We are taking in all of the facilities that public safety currently owns and operates will be included in this, and it will definitely lead to the discussion should the facilities maintenance group handle those facilities. So I can't answer whether it will actually be the start of us taking those on, but it will definitely be the start of that conversation with council. Currently, public safety is taking care of, similar to how Public Works in the utilities with water and wastewater, we handle all of the facilities at the wastewater treatment plant. That's just what we do. However, public safety, it's definitely not their skill set. They're not used to operating and maintaining some of those. So I think as we move forward, we'll want to have that conversation. I think it will be a big shift for the department, and it's going to cost a little bit more than maybe what they are currently paying. But at the same time, it might provide a much higher level of service and lead to a lot longer asset life.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Climate Task Force. Aaron reported on that. We've not really made a lot of progress. This also was a 3-star item coming out of strategic planning. We have got an initial framework that we're going to be presenting to you at an upcoming council meeting or workshop, and I want to say that's within the next few weeks. End of August. Thank you. We've met with Councillor Auger and De La Grange, and layperson Mr. Bradbeer. Tom Bradbeer is really hot to trot on this topic, and he has provided a wealth of information for us. So we're putting together a framework to get in front of you to find out what level of activity you folks want to take on this. That way we'll know where we need to go in the future. So you'll see that it's only on here once because we're going to present it. We really didn't know what its future looks like moving forward. We will take that from your direction at that council meeting. Questions on the Climate Task Force? So improve problem intersections for pedestrians. This is one of the goals that's been on the strategic plan for quite some time. This month, we're highlighting Grandview and Ramsey pedestrian enhancement. This is an intersection that's kind of in a really awkward area around the hospital where it's in a mid-bend, multiple angles. The streets come in a little bit at obtuse angles, and then the hospital put all their parking across the street. And so now suddenly we have a large number of people crossing the street. Unfortunately, I think most of the problems come that they're not actually crossing at the intersections, so they cross it. So what we're trying to do, we have beefed up the signaling in the area. We just completed the installation of radar signs, and the next phase will be doing some elevated crosswalks with some lights in them to actually get some more attention. So we're paying a lot of attention. We want to work with businesses in the future, though, when they do some of these changes, that we push some of these back to the businesses that are creating the pressure on the intersection. Asante has been great to work with. In fact, they paid for the signs. We did the installation. They continue to be a very good partner, but we want to catch these ahead of time as opposed to being reactive later. So this was a really good one for us to learn to think a little bit ahead. Nobody really anticipated when they put the parking over there how many people would be coming back and forth. It is now a very busy pedestrian corridor. And then we'll continue to take those on as intersections come up, when we believe that one will be completed in the third quarter, actually this month. Questions about intersections? Yeah.
Well, actually, it's a question on a different subject in your matter of expertise. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I just look at the boss.
To facilitate the flow of topics. So one of the things in terms of housing is land. And the Allen Creek Road area and the urban renewal, well, not the urban renewal, but the urban area.
rezone.
Yeah, and the rezoning. Could you give us a little detail on that?
Well, how about I do Allen Creek Road next, as it's on the board, which is a key player in part of that rezone, to be quite honest, but also working, I'm sure Brad will talk about it, but we're really having to do a reset on a portion of the transportation system plan. But the ODOT has signed an agreement with the contractor for the design of Allen Creek Road, and that was completed. We expect them to begin design in the this quarter, with design moving forward into quarter 4. And they are going to start with the right-of-way acquisition shortly thereafter. They are actually anticipating construction complete. It's off of the map, but it'll be roughly fourth quarter of 23 and into 24. So ODOT, I think they're overly optimistic, but that's what they put in the last report to us. They are on that timeline, and they are going to move.
I was just going to add to that our last MPO meeting, we just approved the funding to do that because the cost of it went up, and this was just kind of a sad situation. I was on the council in 2015 when it was first discussed and tossed around. The cost has gone up like 2.5 times what it was in just that 6 years. So we got to get on it so that it doesn't go up anymore. But they did approve the funding for it.
Yep. And the scope has changed a little bit. We are now actually even including a signal at the intersection of Allen Creek and New Hope. That I noticed that was in that project. It kind of just slipped in. It was not discussed, but ODOT feels that it is warranted at this point.
And Jason, the last time the previous design for the alignment of the road and so forth was shown to the council, will we have that opportunity again, because we've gone with a new engineer at this time?
So yes, the engineer will be starting with the base drawings that were provided. I want to say that it would be ideal if we could stick with a similar road width to what was previously agreed on, which is a little bit narrower than what we normally allow for that street. It's narrower than the section that's previously constructed. But I would caution everybody that we don't want to get into where we were previously, where we come back with 25 different iterations of road and drag the project out again. We want to probably make that decision pretty quickly. So we'll come back definitely with the road profile that what was previously approved and show that to council and take direction at that point.
And I know some of the questions or philosophy at that point was tried to protect some of the trees, and I know in some cases it was possible and not possible, so I didn't know if there'd be an update on that.
Yeah, my guess is we'll continue with that jog. As you recall, that was the other thing, is that they put a little jog in the middle trying to ensure that traffic slowed down a little bit. That seems to be a popular concept. You know, I think you're always going to have speeders out there, especially initially, and so we'll work with public safety on items. I think the center island, you know, putting trees in the center island is going to really help with that. And then as things develop, you'll see some of those trees come out to be able to facilitate access to properties on either side. That's part of why we really need to continue with the design and work with Brad and his team, is because we don't have a current design for a street layout in that area. And what you have are a bunch of random driveways, and that's what you want to avoid on that classification of street. We want to get it down to a couple of side streets to where everybody's driveways kind of turn onto that as best as possible. Questions about
This is
Allen?
Vanessa.
Yes.
Yeah, Jason, has there been any discussion on the development of this, of dedicated bikeways or a bike lane?
Yeah, so that is actually a requirement of any project that receives federal funding. We have to install multimodal or pedestrian and bikeway access on any project with federal dollars. So that is included in the design.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any discussion about using traffic circles for areas like Allen Creek and New Hope instead of doing a signaled light?
Yeah, there definitely was initially. On the Allen Creek at Harbeck, there is not enough real estate to be able to accommodate a roundabout. The other side would have similar constraints with the creek coming through and also with existing properties, and so likely they won't be installed on this project. Right now it's just too constrained and too built out.
I've seen some pretty small traffic circles. They don't need to be huge.
Okay. Duly noted. Duly noted. Water restoration plant digester rehab was on the list of, I want to say 2-star items, and that now is been expanded. As you recall, we came to you and we expanded that to a digester cleaning to go in conjunction with the replacement of the digester heat exchange. That design work is now complete. That project will be out to bid probably in the next couple of weeks. You'll be seeing that. We'll begin construction late in the year, in the fourth quarter, and that will be complete probably in the second to third, there it is, second quarter of 2022. This is actually an ideal time because we were able to combine that work. They're going to be able to take that digester completely offline now while they're installing the heat exchanger, which will allow that cleaning and everything to happen at the same time. It should minimize the amount of time that the digester's offline, which is going to, just be ready for it, it is going to create some bad odors at the wastewater plant for a very short period of time. So this is ideal. Not only did we save a fair amount of money by lumping these two projects together, but we're minimizing the amount of time that it's going to be offline and creating really bad odors for the neighbors. And it's unavoidable. When you take that digester offline or the digester gets sick, the wastewater plant smells. I know people think it smells anyway, but it doesn't. Digester gets sick, it smells really bad. Questions about the digester rehab? Yeah. Well, unfortunately, with the river in there, you know, it's up in the morning and down, it's bad. So moving forward, Foundry and Booth sidewalks. This has been on the item for a couple of years. This is a very challenging project, and this is installing sidewalks at the intersection of Foundry and Booth. This area is in that railroad overlay area. We have to get the sidewalks across the railroad, which is going to be a challenge in conjunction with making those intersections there. We currently have another project that is not on the list, but it was in the report that we gave, that's in the larger plan. There is call for a railroad crossing at I'm going to get the name of the street wrong, the one the hospital was on. Thank you, Dimmick. And the reason is Dimmick is slated to be a collector. It is a straight street that gets the traffic all the way through from one end of town to the other. It is in the master transportation plan as being the through street. We do not want to invest a lot of money in a street crossing here at Foundry and Booth if they're going to make us take one away. And generally the railroads, when you want to add a crossing, you have to take one away. They do not like adding a bunch of crossings to the railroads. If we are going to need another crossing, that Dimick is really the most logical location. It really does get traffic east and west, north and south, much better, and off of 6th and 7th. We're still investigating this, but again, we don't want to invest a lot of money in getting sidewalks across the railroad in this location. So we're looking at maybe a scaled back project and just hitting the upper portions right around the stores and the cross of the intersection street. But we don't want to do the railroad crossing until we have a firm answer on that second crossing. Questions? I'm looking at all the others. Welcome Center facade improvements. This is actually scheduled to be presented to you this, I want to say next meeting, isn't it? It's coming up G Street is next meeting. I want to say it's a little bit later than that. G Street's the next meeting. But this one is, we've got some concept drawings that have been looked at by the Historic Building and Sites, but we will get that in front of you, get direction, and keep that project moving forward. And then I also wanted to say, we believe third quarter looking out, and I know that that's out there quite a ways. It's just there's a lot of time to pull plans together. We would like to delay any work on that until the contracting market is settled down. We are struggling to find contractors. We're doing a little bit of an interior remodel at the city yard because we have so many people crammed into one building. We're really trying to make some more space for them in there, and we cannot get contractors to bid on the work. They're too busy out doing new homes. There's a lot of work out there right now. So that's the tentative plan for that. We will get a bunch of preliminary drawings, provide some feedback from the Historic Buildings and Sites Commission, and take direction from council on what they would like to see next with that facility. Questions on that project? Okay. Similar is developing a parking and restroom management plan. This kind of goes along with that, and that was the purchase and installation of the Portland loos. Council did give us direction to purchase the 3 loos. I will tell you it's on hold. Scott Chansey has not gotten permission from the Board of Commissioners to purchase. I will tell you that he is still very confident that they are giving that. It was supposed to be given last week, but I haven't heard whether they held that meeting or not. I wasn't able to reach Scott Chansey for confirmation on that. If it does not, we'll probably come back to you and ask to readjust that order. Maybe we don't want to buy 3 at that point and we want to get 1 or 2, seeing as we'll be losing that 5% discount. It's only 5%, but it might make a difference in the price, so we'll come back to you at that point. So far, Portland Loo is holding that 5% offer, understanding that we're waiting on confirmation from the Board of County Commissioners on how they're moving forward with their restrooms. With that, we would anticipate if we do make the purchase, we would be able to get one installed this winter. So ready for next season. Questions on that? Yeah.
So you're at this point saying it's just a matter of the commissioners making a decision whether they're going to put Portland Loos there or they're going to be building some other restroom facilities.
Correct. Yeah. If Scott Chansey doesn't get permission to purchase the 2 that they had committed to, that means we don't meet the threshold for the 5% discount, and we would want to come back and have that conversation.
Sure, in reading the site plan applications, I did notice that they submitted for a minor site plan review in adding those Portland Loos. Is that just anticipatory, or is that evidence of direction?
I cannot speak for Scott Chansey.
I'm understood.
Scott has been very positive that he will be purchasing Portland Loos to install at the bus hub. Very positive. Yep. So that brings us, I want to say I'm looking at the rest of them. We've got a couple others, Grandview, we covered that. We did that. I think there's another project like the water plant or something that's kind of hanging out there. We'll close with that. So we did select a contractor. It was Sladen Construction Group Incorporated. Through the process, we'll be bringing that to you for consideration. We are finalizing the scope of work, the contract, and the price. And so that's why you haven't seen anything yet. We have a workshop scheduled for the 23rd of August, I believe, with tentative approval of that Phase 1 services for fourth quarter, and will immediately start into work with technology selection. As we talked to you guys about that previously, now that we looked at a smaller footprint, alternative technologies might make more sense on that site. And so we'll be back in front of you with that technology selection work to say, here's what the various capital projects will cost us, here's what the operations of those projects will cost us. At that point, we will then give them authorization to start design after you help us with that selection process. What I did want to report, and it will be in the workshop and all of that too, but Sladen Constructors, we had 7 different evaluators. Wade, myself, water plant supervisor Adam Smith, and Kira. We also had Rob Brandis from Josephine County Public Works. We had Mike Thornton, who is a contract city engineer, and we also had a member from the Medford Water Commission, Dr. Ben Clayman, who's a brilliant, he used to work for engineering firms. But out of that group, Sladen was number 1, 6 out of 7 evaluators, which I've never seen. And he was number 2, they were number 2 on that other group. So we did interview all 4 groups, which did amazingly well. We couldn't have come out on the bad side. The groups that came together and put forward presentations for all of our consideration, we just can't thank them enough. They really did an incredible job. In fact, I'm meeting with them all again this week to kind of talk about their proposals and how that all went. So it was a great experience. We have a great team, and I think you guys are going to be pleased with those results. So pretty excited. Question about the water plant? Because we do carry it around, we are going to be going into design and then construction. Right? Construction, we should have the guaranteed maximum price around the second quarter of 2023, excuse me, with construction to begin immediately thereafter. So it's going to move pretty quickly. What we're hoping is in maybe August 23rd meeting, we can do the site visit. That'd be a great time to get out on site, meet the contractor, the work will be ready to go. And then we can come back here and talk about all the details in the scope of work, and it's 187 pages.
Looking at the timeline, I find it interesting that we could probably start from scratch building a water treatment plant and be done before we build a road. That's good for us, being able to build a water treatment plant.
I only took on Allen Creek Road 2 years ago, so.
It's not you, it's just the complexity of
It is.
Allen Creek Road. It goes to show the complexity, because building a water treatment plant, that's a huge deal. It takes multiple years. And just to do one road, it's taking multiple years because of the complexity of the funding and the property acquisition, right-of-way acquisition stuff.
Yeah.
Question on this?
No, yeah, any questions? I think that was all of the public works items.
Well, then it looks like we got Brad coming up then.
Brad!
Good morning. Brain dump time for you all. I guess I'll start with Dollar Mountain since it's here at the top left. So it's on here only as one project throughout this, but the truth is there's kind of 3 discrete things going on with Dollar Mountain. As you know, there's the Crescent parking lot, which will create 11 new parking spaces off Crescent right where the trailhead comes down. There is the fire mitigation fuels reduction work going on, and then there's the trails. So we're on the plan here, we're calling it Dollar Mountain, what are we, management plan and trails plan or something like that. But it's actually right now, there's all 3 of those things are going on. In terms of the parking lot, it has been approved through Planning Commission. There were some opposition in the neighborhood up there on Crescent, but the Planning Commission did end up approving it. So the land use piece is done. The RFP is more or less drafted. So that is what you see coming out here in the next quarter to actually build that. We got an $80,000 grant on that, so that will cover the majority of the cost on that parking lot piece. On the fuels reduction, we got word just last week from Tyler at Oregon Department of Forestry that 155 acres have been completed. So if you walk up there, you'll see a bunch of piles. And those piles are just going to sit there until, the weather allows for that. So we're not going to go out tomorrow and start burning the piles. So that's good news. They finished really pretty ahead of schedule on that phase. Now there is still more work to be done in terms of the fuels reduction. So that will probably happen later in the fall. So that's good news. And then the third piece related to Dollar Mountain is the trails. And you authorized submittal of a grant just, I think, a couple of meetings ago to Oregon, State of Oregon Parks and Rec. So that's going to be submitted probably soon. I don't know if Adam has more update. That's probably coming up. We've already, received $100,000 related to the first phase, and then of course we have the Oregon tourism grant that's also active right now. There's been a committee that's been meeting for I don't know how long before I came on, a couple of years on the master planning piece, and that's kind of being led by the National Park Service. And there's people from the county on that. There's citizens that have been meeting on a regular basis. So that master planning work includes that phase 1 trail, and I think is council directed. We kind of pulled back a little bit until we knew what the word was on the public safety levy. Now that has been approved, we're kind of moving ahead on this pilot project. So that is where we have here in the first quarter of 2022, prepare a draft plan for future phases. So that's actually phases 2 and 3. If you look at the master plan work that's being done, that includes trails that are not on city-owned property. So the first phase trail is 100% on city-owned property. So that's why we can proceed with that. So lots of movement, and again, some of that depending on how that grant funding comes through. So anything on Dollar Mountain?
Yeah, I just had a question about that committee that you said, the planning committee for Dollar Mountain. Do we have staff person or some sort of liaison to that committee, or how is the city represented on that?
Wendy has been that person participating, and there may be another one, and forgive me, I haven't been involved with that one directly, so but I think Wendy has been. So with her departure, we'll need to get somebody else lined up.
I have a question about, I know that we did hold off. We wanted to see how the levy went before we moved forward. So was it able to move forward without any other things needing to come before the council, or are we spending those grant monies now? Is that what's being spent, and when will the actual building of the trails happen, or is that happening now?
No, it's not happening now. It's an interesting thing. You think, well, let's just get some people out there and identify where the trail is going to go, and then get some volunteers and just start digging and shoving. It doesn't quite work that way. It's a pretty technical field in terms of identifying the curves, working with roots, working with rock outcroppings, and being able to construct the trail in such a way that it's relatively safe. I don't know, for me, I'm not going to be the one to get on and take my bike down there, but for some, there are some standards that need to be met. So we did identified somebody that could help us put the RFP together. So and that work is largely done. So we will be going out this quarter, I believe it's on there, with that. So that's where we're at with that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just to follow up on what Valerie said, I remember earlier this year it came to council, and council was kind of like, let's wait for now. And then we've gotten through kind of the waiting time, so it doesn't need to come back to us for any sort of decision or consideration. It's just good to go.
Well, phase 1, in terms of I think we've called it the pilot trail, which is the one on the city property, would not. I mean, I think the RFP has already come before Council, or at least the authorization. If it hasn't, we can certainly get that before you. But the master plan work that will show phase 2 and 3, we'll be bringing that back. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So, okay. Okay. Let's see, the next one we've got in community development, the urban growth boundary rezone project. So the point on this one, it really all ties back to the letter that we received from ODOT, which raised concerns about the compliance with the transportation planning rule. Council authorized a $36,000 contract to hire David Evans and Associates to help work through those concerns with the state rule. And, you know, the point being, all of this 540 acres and traffic that it will generate, where is that going to impact? And what kind of traffic mitigation do you have to do to be in compliant with the state rule? The DEA did their first detailed review, and we have continued to have conversations with ODOT about using their modeling, and we want to make sure that what's called TPOW, which is the Oregon Department of Transportation's modeling group in Salem, to make sure that what we bring forth is going to meet their expectations in terms of, you know, what the scope is. Rather than us just going and preparing this study. So those conversations have been happening between the consultant and ODOT. At this point, our intent, unless something really gets thrown at us that we're not expecting, is to have that report done, which shows what all the mitigation work is required, which also shows funding. And that's another key piece that ODOT's asking for, is that you can't just show what intersections and what traffic improvements are necessary for the rezone. You also have to show how are you going to pay for these. You don't have to have the money in hand, but you have to demonstrate how you're going to mitigate for that. So that's part of the contract with DEA. So their work should be completed in the fourth quarter of this year. And that would basically reopen up the public hearings for the rezone at the Planning Commission, and then come back to you in the first quarter of the 2022. So that's where we're at.
So for final approval from ODOT would be first or second quarter of 2022? Because it's going to have to go through public hearings. Does ODOT's approval come before or after those public hearings?
Their review of the TIA, is that what you mean? Of the TIA that's being prepared would come prior. Yeah.
Okay, but you also said an element of funding. So before they give their final stamp of approval, we'll need to show where the funding's coming from?
Correct.
And at what point would that have to occur before we go to public hearing in the first quarter?
Well, that would be my recommendation. You know, I think you're going to want to have the confidence that ODOT has, approved the TIA before we proceed with the actual rezone.
Okay. So looking at this timeline, the earliest a developer could come in and say, the city got my zone change for me, would be the first quarter? Or is it going to be the second quarter?
No, I would anticipate the second quarter, in terms of the actual rezone ordinance being adopted and going through, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And adding on that question, is it going to come in pieces and parts? In other words, is there going to be, say, since we're doing Allen Creek, that would be the first one, or are there going to be different areas of the urban growth boundary that can go?
Right.
I mean, is it going to be in pieces, I guess is what I'm saying.
It's a good question, and some of that, I don't think we have a good answer for you right now, because in the meeting that's happening soon with DEA and ODOT, if the result of that meeting is you're going to have a substantial change to the transportation system plan, which is quite possible. I mean, you're talking about if you're adding new lanes, if you're adding new signalization, As Jason mentioned, I mean, that would potentially trigger a change to our adopted TSP, which you just adopted in October. If that is what is triggered, then we would probably go to the phased approach and just probably start with Allen Creek, rather than, because it's the full 540 acres, I think that's really causing some concern. So if you piecemeal it, come in, and I think it's been reiterated several times, developers can come in at any time. You know, this is something that we're doing on our own.
So just for clarification on what a rezone project is, we're taking properties that are zoned by the county and we're converting them to equivalent city zoning?
Not equivalent.
Okay, so
No,
what
that's the problem.
consideration is given in what they're zoned to, I guess?
So what they're being rezoned to is based entirely on the comprehensive plan. So the city's adopted comp plan, which was changed in 2014, went through the entire unincorporated urban growth boundary and identified what the potential zoning for city would be. And so there are comprehensive plans, city comp plan designations already on all these properties. So the rezoning is taking it from the comp plan, which is like a future designation, and putting an actual city zone on it.
Okay, has there been any thought to potentially take a review of those preliminary zoning recommendations in lieu of maybe potentially having higher density zones in any of those areas?
We have not done that to date. You know, if you take, for example, if the Allen Creek area is designated for like medium density residential, which only allows for 3 city zones. So you can only choose 3 city zones to put on that stretch of Allen Creek under the comprehensive plan. So what the consultants and staff did was looked at each area and said, okay, well, this is, in order to achieve, you know, the housing goals, this is probably the preferred zone. So that's what the staff report includes, is what those kind of preferred zones are for all those areas. So if we were to downzone, it's possible that we can do that, but only within the range of the comprehensive plan designation that's already there.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah. Anything else on that one? All right. What else for community development here? The AVS communities, there we go, that's first quarter. So, so staff has had some phone and email correspondence over the last few months with Craig Thomas. He is the Senior Vice President for AVS Communities based out of Woodland Hills, California. And he has reiterated in those phone conversations and in the email conversations that they are proceeding. The construction costs have challenged them just like so many other developers, and they are kind of regrouping on that. They have said that the architect that they identified in their RFP, they are changing their architect, so they have already reselected a different one. They have the agreement which Mark drafted, which includes the purchase and sales agreement and development agreement, as well as a deed restriction. So there's basically 3 documents that they have. They have met with their attorneys. They have reviewed those documents. They are meeting this Wednesday with their finance group. So they have a team of 4 different partners in this project, and the team that the company that specializes in low-income housing tax credits, they are meeting with on Wednesday this week. And what I've been told is that they are going to be, you know, after that meeting, we'll be sending those agreements back to the city, at which point we'll schedule a public hearing and a meeting for the city council. So that's kind of the gist. Now, in terms of the rest of the quarters that are up here, that's really taking what was in AVS Communities RFP and tacking on another 6 months, because that's basically what's happened. So they had 114 weeks was the total time frame that was in their project from the time that they were approved through to certificate of occupancy. And that's, at this point, we haven't heard anything different than what was in the RFP, which is 66 units, senior housing, all of it at 60% of area median income or below. So.
Brian's got it right now.
I don't know, and I'm sure you had it because it was in the paper, that Jackson County Cathedral Squares is the Grants Pass project that they did get tax credits for, is a 50-unit that was approved this last week through the tax credit to be built in Josephine County, because when we originally saw it, it said Jackson County Cathedral Square, but in following up, it is the project out at Harbeck and whatever it is, out by South Middle School.
Grandview.
Grandview. So they did get approved for a 50-unit, $17 million project out there. So that's exciting. But because the cost, it's over $300 per square foot to build it, but they did get the financing to do it. So that's exciting.
It is. At Friday, this last Friday, Housing Advisory Committee meeting, Jason Elzey, who is the executive director of Jackson Housing, kind of told the group that. So it's exciting.
I saw when it came out, because my husband also got some funding for some things. I saw it was Jackson County, so I was disappointed, but in going back, I found out it was Josephine County. I was excited.
Let's see, and then I think the last one for community development is implementation of the Housing Action Plan, and I think Aaron covered this pretty well in his presentation, but you know, when we say Housing Action Plan, I think there's a couple of things going on here. One is the Housing Advisory Committee put together a Housing Action Plan, which has about 40 different steps in it related to housing. A lot of which is affordable housing, but some of it is market rate as well. So this timeline up here really is talking more about the housing needs analysis, the buildable lands inventory, and the middle housing code update. That's the work that's related to House Bill 2001 and 2003. And as Aaron mentioned, those documents are all drafted, and staff's reviewing them now, and so we should see public hearings at Planning Commission in the fourth quarter starting, which means you would have public hearings in the first quarter of 2022 on those.
So yeah, House Bill 2001 was mentioned in the prior presentation, but then I wanted to inquire about House Bill 2003 and what the plan is for that. Have we been actively involved in pursuing that? Because that's housing needs analysis and housing production strategies. I know that DLCD's been doing some webinars to kind of get communities used to what they're expected to do under this House bill. And so just general conversation about what the plan might be to comply with that House bill and what kind of timeline we may be able to expect.
Sure. So the mayor actually did sign a kind of a letter of support for the preliminary letter of interest to DLCD for House Bill 2003. We sent that in, and we were notified that, you know, we would be invited to submit a more complete application. And this application basically funds a consultant to work with the city to develop that housing production strategy. So those are due August 30th. They were due originally a few weeks ago. They got so many, they extended the deadline. So by August 30th, the city has to submit its detailed plan for how it wants to use consultants to do the housing production strategy. So we're working on that right now. We got notified from DLCD staff that the legislature actually authorized additional funding for HB 2003, and so they're pretty confident that those that apply will get the money. Obviously, we don't know for sure until September. So I think, what does that mean? I mean, a housing production strategy can take a number of different, approaches. For us, one of the pieces would be the utilization of surplus land to, for affordable housing.
So, question I have is, it seems as though for sustainable funding, for whether it's incentivizing or subsidizing different lower or middle income housing projects, it seems like construction excise tax is kind of a common denominator in cities where it works. And I know that it seems as though before I was elected, sometime last year, it seemed as though construction excise tax was pretty clear as where Grants Pass needs to go. And so now we're a year later, and I just don't understand why we don't have it yet.
Well, that's very much a policy discussion and a decision. I mean, the Housing Advisory Committee recommended it.
Okay.
So
okay,
and
then
it's
so fellow councilors are saying it's up to us now, I would say that we should have a special meeting tomorrow and vote on it. Okay, that's what I would say. We should do it like right now. And if not tomorrow, then we should do it next Monday or next Wednesday or whatever. So I just don't, so now, everyone's jokingly saying it's us. I'm saying, well, then let's do it like right now. I don't understand why we're not.
I'll second that.
Yeah, let's do it right now.
So you have an agenda review, just put it on the agenda?
This is Vanessa. I support that as well.
I think it's already scheduled.
yeah, I think so. Isn't it?
Right here, August 16th.
August 16th.
Scheduled for August 16th for a discussion.
Yeah,
It's a workshop.
the last workshop, I'd have to look on when that was and whether it was after January 1 when you, Councilor Pell, and others came on, or if it was prior. But at that point, there was not direction to proceed, so that's why you haven't seen any application come forward to, or not application, but ordinance. So August 16th, yeah, there's a workshop to talk about it.
Well, I will just say that you're right. It was the previous council, and there were workshops. CEDC held several community forums, and at those forums, the builders were very adamant that they did not support it. And so I think that's basically where that direction came from.
I think the last one for community development, restore, replace Caveman Pool. Again, I think Aaron covered that pretty well. That really comes down to the task force, which I think we have at the fourth quarter coming with a recommendation out of that review team to the council. And so at that point, it'll be your call in terms of where we go, whether that's a new location or refurbish where it currently is located.
Caveman Plaza would be one more.
Oh, yes, Caveman Plaza. So this one, we're going to get a lot more information to you next Monday, which is going to be the first discussion related to that property. So what we have laid out here is kind of staff's thoughts about it. Obviously, that can change on Monday if you have something different. But what this anticipates would be a charrette, kind of a design charrette that would be a very broad-based community engagement activity where we would bring in an urban renewal finance specialist, we would bring in a designer, an urban designer, and really just if you haven't participated in these charrettes, I find them to be very kind of, they generate a lot of energy. Sometimes you go one way, sometimes you go the other, you don't know. But basically you have a designer who's in the room who can assist with, actual concepts, design concepts on the fly about what people are talking about. And you just start at a high level. And you just, the goal is not to come out of the project with any kind of design. It's just to sort of reflect what the community, what the neighborhood, what the business owners in that area are, what they might envision. Whether that's retaining the existing building and redesigning or going with something entirely new. So that would involve basically an RFP to get a design team that would assist the city with that charrette process. And then, of course, what's the elephant in the room here is what the property owners want to do with the property. And so we'll give you more information in terms of what the zoning is, what you could, what the allowable development densities are, sort of just a profile of the property. That's kind of what we're working on now for Monday. What's shown on the timeline, is really very dependent on what the outcome of the council's decision and what that design charrette would be. So a lot of unknowns on that project.
I had a question about, I got my own mic, about Cape Man Pool, and this is probably for Aaron or maybe even Jason. So 2 of the 3 issues that it's having, one is mechanical and one is chemical. So I was wondering if you could maybe speak to that a little bit more, just in a little more detail.
Well, I can tell you that the issue most recently has been the chlorinator, and it was blowing a fuse, and so it was not proportional. I don't know the correct term for it. Our certified pool operators could give you a more detail, but basically that level of chlorine was not operating correctly. So the electrician came out, fixed that issue last week. I think that's mechanically the main issue that's going on.
Are we having issues with chlorine or other chemicals as far as supply goes?
Definitely, yeah. We did get a new supply last week, and I don't know how long that's intended to last. I can get that information for you though.
Okay, so our chemicals for the pool are completely and totally separate from our chemicals for water treatment.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a special contract with the water treatment plant.
I was just going to speak. Our pool uses HTH, which is a granulated form of chlorine. Almost all of that was supplied from one plant that was on the East Coast that burned down last year. And so nationally, there is a shortage of HTH available for pool use this year. So even for your home pool, if you go in to buy it at the store, what I've heard is they're going to limit how much you can buy, that it really is that desperate. So at the water plant, we use a liquid bleach. The pool is not set up to use a liquid bleach. So it is a different supply.
Great, thanks for that info. And one piece for Joel to take back to the pool task force might be technologies for the future pool. If we're going to be having issues getting a supply of HTH in the future, maybe looking at alternative chlorination or cleaning methods.
I think that's it for CD.
All right, thank you, Brad. So we did cover everything up here on what we see as actively working on and trying to gauge some of those 3-star items. Open it up, Mayor, to any other questions or any additions or suggestions, but that sort of concluded our report with regards to this timeline in the Q2.
I had a quick question for Brad, just an update about the housing specialist position.
Thank you. So we had our first round of interviews a couple of months ago. We made an offer to a housing and neighborhood specialist. She lived in Michigan, and due to some problems with her spouse and his relocation, she withdrew her application after the tentative offer was made. So about a week later, we reopened the position. It's currently open. We have a couple of applicants that are under review, but we haven't scheduled the actual interviews yet.
Does anybody else have any questions before we go back to our seats? We can continue talking
So
up there.
I guess this question is probably for Aaron. So I'm not sure where council left it, or are we waiting for, I guess, an executive session as far as acquiring land for urban campground? We kind of hoped we were going to get lucky like Medford did with some cooperating personally just wanted their property cleaned up or whatever. It doesn't appear as if we've gotten lucky. So is it clear to you yet what the next step might be as far as the strategy goes if we're not going to find a place to essentially borrow? Is it clear to you what the next step would be?
I think the next step is to buy some property.
Yeah, we're still hopeful that we can, between now and the 16th of August, that we can find an interested, willing partner. And that could be something that we could bring to the table at that time. Of course, if you can't find a willing partner, then we would need to look at the potential of acquisition and have council consider what that might look like also.
So are you currently looking at any properties to acquire?
Yes,
Just looking for partners?
all of the above, both, yes.
He has some properties that he wants to tell us about. So rather than having the discussion about exactly which properties we're looking at in open session, we're having a real estate conversation in executive session. But there would be specific properties discussed. That's the reason for the executive. All right, I think we can probably all go back to our seats and keep talking. Thanks, it was fun to get off our bums for a moment. Well, now that we've had a good overview of both what we have done so far this year and what staff has lined out for us to work on over the course of really, what is that, the next, some of these projects go out a couple years. Is there anything that you see missing that we really need to be sure to jump on, or any orders that you want rearranged a little bit as we move forward here for the next 6 months? Rob and then Brian.
So I know that we're going to have a discussion on different fire mitigation strategies. I don't know that it's clear that we are planning a discussion or a plan for evacuation possibilities. I know that I guess Ashland and Medford have plans that have been disseminated, within the public, and I don't know that we've got that going yet.
Well, the August 2 workshop says emergency management update and evacuation routes, as well as the wildfire protection plan. I think those are being presented by 2 different people. It looks like we're having Emily come. She's from the county. Okay. Our new county emergency planner. Okay. So, yep, just, what is that, 2 weeks out? DJ?
Also, one more thing about Firewise and evacuation routes. Rob? Otherwise, about those Firewise and evacuation routes, so we've put it on a topic of conversation for the meeting with the mayor and myself with the Board of Commissioners. So we're going to talk about their strategy, their plan, what do they have moving forward, demonstrate our plan, and those kind of different things. So encouraging that conversation, so we're certainly going in that direction.
Brian, then Joel, then Rick.
Yeah, I'll just really quick second that sentiment. I'm really looking forward to hearing the wildfire protection plan presentation in a couple weeks. I know yesterday there was a pretty decent sized grass fire in Medford that could have gotten out of control. It was literally right next to the urban campground. And so, as for me, that's a top priority. Thanks.
Thank you. Joel?
So what I was thinking of too, ODF, I would hope has dispatch cards depending upon fire danger and fire conditions that automatically this, and that we coordinate interagency in what we're doing. so that when a fire occurs, the dispatch knows immediately what to do, the dispatch code on who goes where, the coordination with other agencies, to contact the sheriff for evacuation, so forth, so on, outside the city limits, or the chief of police within the city limits, or whoever. That whole thing is already thought out ahead of time, and if you could share that with us. It's not just evacuation plans. It's the whole ball of wax of what we do, so you don't have to think about it at that time. All you got to do is pull up your list. It's extreme fire danger. We have it here. It's in this zone, and so here are the things that we do. And I'm sure a lot of those already exist, and we need to do that interagency and just make the council aware of it, so that, and the public too, if they're interested, because there's no secret there, and go forth. And if there's something that's missing, then we can change it.
Thank you. Rick?
I know we had the discussion about the Dollar Mountain parking lot, and I'm seeing the resolution awarding that doesn't occur to August 18th. And I think the presentation today said probably in October is when the parking lot would be built. Is there, of course, I think the earlier the parking lot's built, the more use the property would get. Is there a reason why the award is in the latter part of August?
Yeah, the August 18 date, I think we set a little while ago. I guess it could be optimistic that we would do that. I think we want to have a placeholder. There is the agreement related to the right-of-way with Bureau of Land Management. That contract has taken a little more time than what we thought. That's critical to wrap that up before we could proceed. But if it turns out we're not able to make that August 18 date, we'll have to push it out.
Yeah, it's pushed back for those reasons, not because we just didn't put it on the agenda soon enough. It's just not ready yet. Other questions, comments? Brian?
This is Vanessa.
Hey, Vanessa, go ahead.
Yeah, for Mayor Bristol and Councilor Fazer, for your upcoming meeting with the county commissioners in regards to evacuations, I'm showing that preliminary approval for evacuation concepts was given, but there's been no final funding. So maybe a discussion around that could happen. I don't know if we need a city-county partnership to encourage that to move forward, but that's definitely something that should be brought up. And I'd like to thank Aaron and staff for the work accomplished so far. It's great to see it all compiled together today. And to answer your question, Mayor Bristol, for the next 6 months, I'd like to see some serious focus on ensuring that urban campground is up and running before our cold weather season. The development of that urban interface wildfire resiliency plan, and like Councilor King said, when Deputy Chief Johnson does come back to us, I'm hoping that this is a plan that is holistic in nature, something that includes landscape treatments, resident mitigation, wildfire response on top of evacuation routes. And the third, and of course, arguably one of the most important, is the implementation of that housing action plan. And I look forward to the work surrounding House Bill 2001 and 2003 coming forward as well.
Thank you. DJ?
Yeah, about the emergency planning and evacuation routes, I did not intend to talk to the commissioners about funding, and I wouldn't be so bold without talking to council about that first. However, if the council board actually wanted Sarah and I to entertain the conversation of IGA regarding funding, I'm happy to do so and gather some information for everybody. So I think that's something that I would need to ask council if they wanted us to talk funding at this point.
IGA's intergovernmental agreement, so.
So
Yeah, this is Vanessa.
I'd appreciate some feedback if council would like us to talk about funding in this conversation.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, if I may, I did ask that the August 2nd workshop would have that discussion as well, the possibility of council contributing some funds to that.
Thank you. Brian was up next. Are you guys responding to the discussion about funding? Yes? Okay. Valerie and Rick.
Well, I guess my question is when is your next meeting with the county? That's what I'm trying to think.
Before August 2nd, it's,
So it is before
It
August
must be
2nd,
the-
so that's what I wasn't sure. I see it's here on August 2nd, but you were saying that your discussion with
27th.
is before that meeting, so at that point in time. Okay, and I was just going to say, it seems like you'd have to have the discussion, if that's what's holding it back, is the funding part, that discussion would have to be discussed at that point. If it's indeed funding that's holding it back, then that's what we need to know, so that we can move forward in the August 2nd meeting.
Rick?
So my impression, I would believe Emily would have that information about funding, or she couldn't be making this presentation. So that may be just, I would say something that's not stated here, but will be included. And you could confirm that. I don't know, it has to be a formal thing, but
How would I just, I'll do my best to gather information about funding sources and bring that back to you guys.
All right, I believe it's Brian's turn.
I'm good for now, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Is there priority changing? I've heard, I guess, that we really want to hit on housing, including HB 2001, 2003, the construction excise tax, fire mitigation evacuation routes. Trying to look at, I've written my notes, unfortunately, in 3 different places. Getting an urban campground going before winter weather. I suppose winter shelter is probably also another related part of that discussion.
Mm-hmm. I'd just like to bring up, and I think you sent an email out about us, as like when we had our ARPA funding and we were talking about doing a forum, setting a date for that, because I do think that's pretty important, that we do that as sooner than later in terms of deciding how we're going to spend that ARPA funding and getting community feedback.
Yeah, as far as that email went, so we were just discussing, I guess, during the agenda setting meeting, how to let people know about the survey, which is not yet developed, and which you will all have an opportunity to provide input into what you would like to ask the public for feedback regarding spending our American Recovery Plan Act money. But, you know, we just had a kind of casual discussion about how we would get the info out to people that we were doing a survey, and DJ and I had inquired about how much it would cost to do a bill insert or a postcard mailer, and it turns out that the postcard mailer citywide is about $8,000, which is a, you know, fairly sizable investment, but a bill insert in the water bill is pretty much just the cost of the photocopying, so it's pretty reasonable, but obviously we're not quite to the point yet of doing that survey or forum, so it's just background info. Anything on that? Brian? No? Different topic? Okay, yeah, I think we're, you know, just at the infancy stages here, both developing the survey and planning the forum, so that's something that would be forthcoming but not happening here in the next couple weeks. New topic, Brian.
Yeah, earlier Rob brought up the prospect of having a special meeting to address the construction excise tax and potentially minimum densities. And you know, I know we haven't called a special meeting this year, so you know, maybe we're due for a special meeting. So I was just going to gauge council interest to see if there are 2 other councilors that would be interested in having a special meeting on that topic before it comes up next month.
So it is on the August 16th workshop. At this time, we don't have the meeting portion of it scheduled out, but there is a meeting on the 18th right after that where we could presumably get it scheduled and wrap everything up if you're so interested. But is there any interest in a special meeting? I'm not sure the 2-week difference will make a real significant change there, Brian, but good try. All right, anybody else? All right. Well, I guess the next and last topic here is just agenda review. So if anybody else has anything that's maybe not of huge 3-star priority, but something else you would like us to discuss in the coming weeks, now's your chance. All right. Otherwise, I think we can say good meeting today and ready to adjourn until next week, right? We have, actually, take it back, Wednesday. Okay, well, let's just go over real quick. July 21st. Didn't realize I was off by a week here. Council action item to discuss the false alarm fee that we had discussed once before. A resolution regarding the Innovation Hub, a resolution to provide SDC grants to both the Baker Charter School and Admire Aesthetics. And then on the consent calendar, we have a resolution that would amend the comprehensive fee schedule, a resolution that would reclassify the facilities specialist we discussed last week, a motion to approve the May monthly financial report, and a resolution for the Community Development Policing and Dispatch Accreditation Grant, as well as appointing a Parks member and a Bikeways, Walkways committee member. Any questions about any of that? All right, Aaron.
Mayor,
Yes?
if I may, on that last consent calendar item, the resolution on community development, policing, and dispatch accreditation grant, we recently found out that we could apply for 2 separate grants. So you'll be getting an amended resolution and background that changes that to apply for both up to $75,000 each. So you'll see that change to the packet.
Great, thank you. And then Aaron is planning to not be at that meeting, but as you can see, it's a small agenda, and we will have very capable staff members leading the way on the couple of agenda items we have there. Then next week for our workshop is kind of a big downtown look at our downtown plan with consultant Jim Love, as well as discussing the Caveman Plaza urban renewal possibility and some ideas for reconfiguring G Street. So kind of a big focus on downtown. Brian.
Yeah, on Wednesday's meeting, I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that Bikeways did not get to the committee member recommendation, so that will be deferred another month.
Okay. Do we have applicants? Okay, good. All right. Questions about any of that? All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second from Valerie. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? See you Wednesday evening, 6 o'clock.